And during the series of Advent, I'm going to be tag team teaching. And so to lead us off, the lead-off batter for our series here is going to be our adult ministries pastor, Gino. So give it up for him.
Wow. Wow, thank you. Thank you. I am Pastor Gino. I'm the adult ministries pastor, and I am so grateful to be here. And if you're joining us online, you can go up to the top of the page and click on the link there. It will take you to Pastor Jim's notes, and you can follow along as we go. If you have your Bibles, turn to Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 through 19, or swipe on over with your phone. And we begin now. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. Underline the rest of verse 10 with me, if you will. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven and as many as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. He has prepared for them a city. Verse 17, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. So praise God for the word. Hey, so today's message is about hope, and I'm so grateful that during this Christmas time, I have the privilege of starting off with hope. A lot of people hoping for things that they're going to get at Christmas time, especially those kids that may be looking for a special toy or what have you. But the first point that we're going to look at today is Abraham had no hope. Abraham had no hope. Abraham was born around 2100 BC in the city of Ur. After marrying his wife Sarai, his brother Haran died. He then left with his father Terah and their clan to live in Canaan. Halfway there, they stopped and settled in the city of Haran, where Terah died. So I wanted to show you a map to kind of get a feel for, as we start to go through this account, the journey of Abraham, and point out a few points. So down there in that bottom right-hand corner, you can see Ur. This is where Abraham was called, and he traveled up the Euphrates to Haran, which is up there at number 2 at the center top of the map there. And then he traveled down from there down to Canaan, because he had to go around the Arabian desert, and in order to keep your flocks watered, you would go along the river so you could take care of your flocks as you went. So this is the path that Abraham went on. It's the same path that the Magi would travel as they go to see Jesus as well, because this is how everybody that was coming from basically what is modern-day Iraq up through Syria and down to avoid the desert to go up and around. So that's the path that Abraham traveled. Come back to your notes now. At the age of 75, God called him to leave Haran to go to Canaan. So he left his extended family there at Haran. Following God often means letting go of the past to find blessing in the future. And here's our first principle. Sometimes the end of our plans is the start of God's plans. So let's consider this. Are any list makers in here, to-do list makers? Raise your hand if you're a list maker. Oh, wow, look at that, a bunch of you. So don't you just love making the list, and you write it all down and you get it all lined out and you're trying to figure out what you're doing, and then as you complete it, you just put a line through it. How many put a line through their list or put a check mark? Check mark people? Oh, there's some line people. Oh, wow, look at that. It's evenly split. So here's the thing. How many of you folks that do the list thing once you've done something that wasn't on the list, like you did a thing, it's not on the list, you're like, oh, and you go back to the list, and then you write it down, put a line through it again. Isn't that just so satisfying? You get that, oh, I feel so much better. Because you couldn't go on if you didn't get back on the list, right? It just would bug you the whole entire day. Well, so here's the thing. We do this sometimes. Well, you guys don't do it. Probably it's just me. I go to God with my list and my plan. Here's the 6 things, Lord, that we need to get done. I got the top 4. You do the bottom 2. And he goes, I hand it to him, and he goes, oh, and he pats me on the head. That's cute. We're not doing that. So here's what I would ask for you to consider with God's plans. First thing in the morning, when you get out of bed, you roll your feet over and you put it down on the floor there. Start with this prayer. Lord, what's on your agenda today? What is your plan? Rather than me trying to get all the stuff done, for some of us, right, it all hits us. As soon as our eyes open up, you're thinking about the kids and school and work and doing all the things and grocery shopping. And now we got Christmas coming, got to get all the presents and all that. And we get all wound up in all those things, and we lose sight of what God's plans are. So he's waiting for you to get to the end of your plan so that his plans can begin. Sometimes he doesn't want them at all. He just, no, my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, and my way is higher. So let's consider that this Christmas time to increase our hope on what God's going to do with us. Look back at your notes now. With his wife past childbearing age and no ability to produce an heir to his house, Abraham knew about death, disappointment, and the downfall of his dreams. Here's the next principle. The promises of God never fail, even if our life feels like failure. So for those of you who don't know, Jan and I, my wife, have been married 36 years. We don't have any kids. We just, this is a long story I'm not going to go through. We don't have kids. And it did feel like back then, for the two of us, like, man, we failed. We weren't able to conceive. We couldn't have kids. We talked about adoption and all those things. They didn't work out, and I'll share that later another time, but it just didn't work out. So there was this sense that we felt like failures. But do you guys know that God has a sense of humor? So what he tells your pastor, he's like, hey, here's the plan, right? Back to the plans. I need you to quit your job in logistics, this career you've been working on. Go to work for the church at the Wiener Schnitzel. Go do that thing. And then I'm going to allow you to be the young adults pastor at Rise. Are the Risers in here? Hey, wow, you guys woke up. All right. So this is a blessing that I have, that I'm allowed to be the young adults pastor. And so although the promise I thought was going to be Jan and I having children, now Jan and I are spiritual mom and dad for the Risers. And God has restored. I even tell them that as I get up and get a chance to teach them. I tell them, hey, Jan and I have adopted all of you because we love you with a heart of a mother and father to care for you, to see that's going through. So there you go. And so I'm very grateful for you parents who send your folks. It's Tuesday nights, by the way, 6:30 right here in the cafe. Send them over here. Look back at your notes. From the darkness of despair, God made a promise that Abraham would have innumerable descendants and would bless the whole earth. Abraham had no way of processing why death or disappointment happened in his life, but he always had faith in the promise of God. Here's the third principle. God uses a believer's inability to put his ability on display. So in recovery, we talk about this thing about being powerless and that our life has become unmanageable. And in all that, we can understand how much we aren't able to do things and how much God is able to do those things to keep you sober and to bring you through the things in life that are impacting you. So I want to take you back. I want to tell a story for you. I'll try and make it through this one. 2004. Go back to 2004. My wife Jan and I went to a place called the City of Hope. It's a cancer treatment center. And we went up the third floor, oncology floor. Went into the examination room, and our doctor, Dr. Morgan, was there. And he was a tall guy. He's taller than me, 6'5" or so. Had no mustache, but he looked like Albert Einstein. With the crazy hair and all that, and the big eyes. And he always wore a stethoscope, I remember, with a stuffed animal on it, because he also did pediatric oncology. He did cancer treatment for children as well. So he had that to treat the kids. But we were sitting down in a chair, And Jan was sitting next to me, and I was in this chair, and she was slid right up close to me. And she wrapped her hands around my right elbow as I was sitting there. Dr. Morgan was sitting in one of those stools that has wheels on it, and the seat would spin, and he rolled up close to us in his white coat and his stethoscope. And I looked out over his right shoulder, and I could see out the plate glass window. The sun was just coming in, just like coming in over Duarte where City of Hope is. And I remember thinking at the time, it's like, wow, the sun's, we've been here 7-8 hours already. We got there in the morning, all the tests and all the things that we're going through. And Dr. Morgan, moving close, said cholangiocarcinoma, liver cancer, 2% survival rate. I remember thinking in my head, well, that means 98% death rate. So at that moment when Jan heard the news, I felt her hand tighten down around my elbow. And I thought to myself, had we been standing, I think she would have gone down from just the shock of hearing all that. The thing that came out of that, though, Jan and I had been saved for about 4 years at this point. We're young Christians. Jan had the surety that she was going to heaven. She knew that Jesus was her Lord and that she was going to see him. And it seemed like soon. And she went around to tell friends and family, and Pastor Bill being one of them, say, hey, I know I'm going home, but you got to take care of Gino. I don't want him to do anything crazy. I know he's going to be sad. Can you just take care of him? And she would go around to different people looking to care for me because she was concerned about what my life would look like after she was gone. We had that conversation. The conversation where your wife sits across from you and says the words, when I'm gone, I want you to move on. When I'm gone. So, in all this, we went to chemotherapy and all those things. Jan was able to kind of share Christ, so was I, and a lot of really great things came out of it. But I want you to turn your attention back to the Word now. I had you underline a verse. It was verse number 10. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. In this moment, I think Abraham was thinking of eternity. He knew who his God was. He knew what was going on. Although his circumstances didn't look like he was going to have an heir, that he would have no hope, he knew who he was trusting in, just like Jan knew who she was trusting in, that her eternity was set, and she could share that joy. She could share what was going on, even though we were going through so much at that time. I want to leave you with this. Look for eternity, and you'll experience heaven in your heart, and you'll be blessed in your soul wherever you are. I'm a grateful believer. My name is Gino. Thank you for letting me be of service.
Number one, Abraham had no hope. And many of us in here today have no hope. Many of us realize this might be the last Christmas my marriage will be together. And many of us have health issues that we realize this might be the last Thanksgiving that Grandpa and Grandma are still here, or my kids are still here, or I'm still here. And so many of us despair of the fact that our relationships are dying, our physical bodies are dying, and we have no hope. And let me help you understand something about hope. You're built for hope. Humans are built to have hope. Animals don't have hope. Insects don't have hope. Fish don't have hope. We have hope. You want to know why? Because you're built in the image of God. And so when you lack hope, when you're like, I have no hope, there's so much despair that enters your heart that sometimes it's like, I don't even know if I want to live anymore. Like it's that depth. You can have a lot of money. You can have a lot of popularity. You can have a lot of stuff. But man, if you don't have hope, it's one of the worst places to be. And Abraham was there. And many of us are there today. I have no hope. God said I would have a child, and I'm old. Which leads us to number 2. Abraham was filled with hope. From God's initial promise, Abraham waited patiently for 25 years, from 75 to 100 years old, for God to deliver Isaac to him. Where are my 100-year-old people in here? Where are my 100-year? Who feels 100? Okay, there you go. Like after Thanksgiving, you're like, I think I'm 128 right now, right? Nobody in here is 100 years old. Because if you're 100, you're almost to Jesus anyway. I mean, 100 is old. That's like you fall down, you might not ever get up old. So think about this. I'm going to set you in this story, okay? Abraham, 75 years old, which isn't old, but it's old. God comes to him. Hey, you're in Haran with your family, your clan. I want you to leave these guys, take your family, your nuclear family, and I want you to come down to Canaan, which is modern day Israel. So this story is the reason the Jews of today say, this is our homeland. The war that we're having over there right now, literally this story is the reason. Is Abraham was promised this land by God. We are his progeny. We should be in this land. So if you're like unclear about the war or why there's fighting over there among, people who claim to be Palestinians, like this is our land. And the reason there is that is because of this story, literally. So, ready? Abraham leaves Haran, comes down to what's known then as Canaan, and God promises him, I'm going to give you a child. But he's 75 years old, and his wife is old. They both look like bags of potatoes. They're old. But God comes and goes, I'm going to give you a baby. And he's like, you're about 40 years late, God. He goes, nope, I'm going to handle it. And you know what? To Abraham's credit, he goes, he believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Didn't have to, chose to. Chose to believe God for a miracle. But guess what? That happened at 75. Imagine year 76, he's like, still no baby. Year 80, still no baby. Year 85, still no baby. Year 98, I'm almost dead, still no baby. Year 90, stinking 9.5, still no baby. And then when he's 100 years old, God gives him a son. To put that in perspective for you, think about going to visit Grandpa and Grandma in the nursing home. You go to visit them, and you show up one day, and they're like, good news! Grandma had a baby! Grandma's like 90, and Grandpa's 100. I don't want to think about how this baby was even made. Imagine you showing up to Grandpa and Grandma at the nursing home, and there's an infant, and you're his son, and you're like 60, and you got a new brother. Talk about family dynamic problems. That's the craziness of this story. Here we go. Here's our principle. God often increases the wait to increase your faith. Oh man, who loves to wait? 0 people. You want to know why? Because especially in our culture, we're like, dude, let's get this done. Man, come on, let's go. What's wrong with this free Wi-Fi? It's so slow. Gosh, I hate this place. Oh, there it is. Now it loaded. Okay, good. Like you have a meal, and it's like, it's a microwave dinner. And you're like, it's going to take 90 seconds for this meal? What, you think I have years to live waiting for this meal? 90 seconds? And you stick it in there and put it on ultra high power to try to get it down to a minute, like 60 seconds? Because we are just super impatient. We're like, come on, get this traffic going. Gosh, what in the world? And you know what God goes? because you're so lame, I'm going to teach you a lesson. You want it now? It's going to be a minute or years. And imagine Abraham waiting 25 years from 75 to 100. He's already thinking they're late. God goes, nope. You're going to wait because your faith in me glorifies me. Ready? I'm going to break something down for you. This is going to hurt your feelings if you're really impatient. To have faith, there has to be a distance between promise and realization. Because if you get everything right away, you don't need faith. It's like, but God's not a vending machine where you just go, I want a candy bar right now. And how about those times when the candy bar just goes, and it's like almost falling, and you like rock the machine, because you're like, I can't wait for the Snickers. It's like hanging out, it's like almost falling. Ready? God's not a vending machine. He's not a genie in the sky where you go, I'm going to give you my things, and then you better get it here. Nope. God goes, I am glorified when you have faith in me. And faith literally requires you at some interval of waiting. And sometimes God extends the waiting to extend your faith and to make you into a man or woman of God. You know where men and women of God are built? In the waiting. Because that's where faith is built. But we hate this distance because we're impatient, but God's not. God cares more about who he makes inside of you through your waiting than you just getting the stuff. Because in this respect, it's literally more about the journey with God than about the stuff you get from God. Because that's where you're made. You're made in the faith distance. Some of Abraham's hope was realized in his lifetime. Isaac, his baby, his son, was eventually born to him at 100. The rest of God's promise, though, was realized thousands of years after his death, right down to our day, where Abraham's descendants, the Israelites or the Jews, have become innumerable. So think about it. Abraham, who was promised, hey, nations are going to come from you. You're going to have a nation of people come from you. Let me help you to understand the Jewish people. Abraham, who was a Chaldean in modern day Iraq. So those of us that went and fought in Iraq or in Baghdad, it's right in that general area. So we still see some of the ziggurats from that day. They still exist from all the way back from Abraham's day. So think about it. He's not a Jew. He's the first Jew. He's a Chaldean. But God calls him out to start a people group. From him, from his body, from his DNA, at 100, he gets Isaac. You would think, this is a pretty treacherous, like, you should be having a bunch of kids. You shouldn't just rely on one, because one might be whack. And imagine, Abraham's like, dude, this is my one son. I'm not getting another one. They're like wrapping him in bubble wrap and stuff like, kid, I need you to make it to when you're able to have your own babies. So come on. But nope, he has faith in God. Lets Isaac be a kid. Grows up all the way till he has his own baby, which is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons, which are the 12 tribes of Israel, which from them come the whole nation, which come the Jews, come the Israelites. Israel is the other name of Jacob, which is why they call them the Israelites, from Jacob. Jacob is the grandson of Abraham. Ready? Here's our principle. The payoff for a believer's hope might not happen in their lifetime. Oh man, this is going to hurt some of your feelings. Look at it with your eyes. Here's the tough teaching. Here's the hard teaching, okay? People pray to God, Jesus, please reach my son. Grandparents praying for their adult son, or parents praying for their teenage son. God, my son doesn't know you. He's living a life of destruction. It's a mess. God, please save his soul. And they pray day and night, and every time their heart's torn to shreds year after year after year after year after year, and their daughter still isn't saved, and their son still isn't saved, and their wife isn't saved, and their husband isn't saved, and they're praying to God, God, please do a miracle. And it just takes years and decades, and sometimes, ready? Sometimes they die without ever seeing God do the thing. But I'm going to tell you what's true. I buried some people, and I knew that they prayed for their kid or their son or their grandson or whatever, and after they're dead, their kid gets saved. That their faith, they didn't get to see it now, but man, I got a chance to witness their faith, God honoring them even after they were gone. They didn't get to see it with their own eyes, but they believed in faith that it would happen. Same thing with Abraham. He doesn't have a child, but he ends up having one, but it says from him innumerable amount of Jews have come. Literally billions of Jews over 4,000 years have been born, and they came from one guy. Ultimately, ready, is what we celebrate today, or we're celebrating during Advent. Jesus comes from Abraham. Here's how crazy this is. If there's no Abraham, there's no Jesus. But Abraham had so much faith, he's like, I don't know how God's going to pull it off, but I believe. And even if I'm dead, I know God's still going to get it done. Literally after this second service, this is the third service, if you didn't know what service you're in. After the second service, I'm meeting somebody out there here for the first time. A young woman, early 20s, comes up and goes, I'm 9 days sober. And I said, good for you. Congratulations. Let us walk alongside of you. And she goes, I've never felt better. I've never had more clarity. I feel like God's in my life trying to do something. I go, awesome. Let us walk alongside of you in your addiction. We come out of that. Just come out of the haze of alcohol. And it was one of those things where somebody's been praying for her. Somebody was praying like, God, rescue my daughter from just addiction. And all of a sudden, bam, one of the hardest times to get hold of your addiction is during the holidays. Because everybody's drinking, or you want to go out with a party with the people, or your people at work or whatever. And she's like, nope, I'm going to start living my life right for God. Ready? The power of your prayer might not happen in your lifetime. But if you are in accordance with God's will, you'll be amazed how even when you're gone, God still gets it done. And when I'm talking about praying in accordance with God's will, does God want your marriage to stay together? Yep. Then you keep on praying. And maybe your husband will come to know Jesus. Maybe your wife will get her act together and come to know Christ. Maybe your son or your daughter will stop being addicted and start following God. But if you just give up, you get nothing. In fact, what's really crazy is this. God sometimes doesn't do stuff because we don't believe. In fact, in this story, it doesn't say God planned on doing this thing and just good thing that Abraham chose to believe. It says God did it because Abraham believed. So it was on Abraham to believe, but God opened the door for him. And you know what's really sad? Sometimes God doesn't do miracles in your life because you don't pray about it and you don't believe that God's going to do anything. So your marriage falls apart and your children fall apart and your whole world falls apart because you just go, I don't know, I just gave up. What are you doing? God still does miracles today. God still does great things in people's lives, but sometimes he waits for you to go, I believe in you. I want to be a part of what you're doing in the world. Instead, we have our own plans and we go, I don't know, I hope God likes it. And then God goes, I didn't want you to go do that, man. I didn't want you to do that thing. So we run off away from God, and then God, who had this whole other plan for us, these miracles he was going to pull off in our lives, relationally, or even financially, or whatever it is, whatever the thing God planned on doing, he goes, let's go do this thing. And you're like, no, man, I don't believe. What's really sad is how many things God could have done in your life if you would have been like, I'm in, God. I don't know how you're going to pull it off. I might be dead, but I believe you're going to do it. Because it aligns with your will, let me align with you, and I know it's going to get done. Additionally, God's ultimate payoff on his promise to bless all the people of the world through Abraham was salvation through the arrival of Jesus. Here's our Christmas story. Matthew 1, chapter 1, 1 and 2. The very first two verses of the book of Matthew in your Bible are these two verses. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of who? David, King David. And the son of who? Abraham. I want you to see verse 1. Verse 1 is a 2,000-year verse. Watch how crazy this is. We are 2023. That means we're 2,023 years from Jesus. Literally every time, even if you're an atheist, every time you say the date, you're talking about Jesus. Sorry. Here we go. Ready? 2,000 years ago is Jesus. 2,000 years before Jesus is Abraham. Abraham's as far away from Jesus as we are from Jesus. That's the distance. So watch this. We're here. Jesus is here. Abraham's way over here. In this verse, Abraham, 2,000 years before Jesus, David, 1,000 years. So Abraham to David, 1,000. David to Jesus, 1,000. Imagine that amount of faith that God blesses through thousands of years, and now we're 4,000 years away from Abraham. And God's still blessing us with Jesus. I'm saved. I'm not even Jewish, but I'm saved because Jesus is the Savior of the world. The Messiah of Israel, but the Savior of the world. Abraham was blessed because his faith in God was not stuck in momentary circumstances, but looked beyond himself to the time of Jesus. Woo! Hey, I had some nice young Mormon men come by my house the other day, and they said this to me: would you like to learn about Jesus? Why, yes, young men. I would love to learn about Jesus. And so one thing that if you're from a Mormon background, or maybe you're Mormon today, or maybe you have Mormon relatives or whatever, in Mormon theology, they teach that Jesus is not eternally God. He is created by God the Father of this universe. So God the Father of this universe has a bunch of spirit babies, and that was you before you were on this earth, okay? Which is heresy. It's not in the Bible. It's heresy. Also, they teach that Jesus hasn't been eternally God, but he was made God's son because God the Father made him. Like he made Satan and all the other angels, he made Jesus, which is also heresy. So that's the reason Mormonism and Christianity aren't the same. Christians believe Jesus has eternally been God, but came into the world through Mary without ceasing to be God. So he took on a body, but he has always been God, was never created as a being. So the reason I tell you that is look at John 8:52 through 59. This is one of the things that Jesus claims to be the eternal God. And so it's one of the ways you can take your Mormon friends to this particular thing and go, hey, Jesus he didn't claim to be a created being of God. He claimed to be God, the eternal God, which is why they hated him and wanted to kill him. The Jews said to him, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died 2,000 years ago from Jesus' time, as did the prophets. Yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham who died? And the prophets? Who do you make yourself to be? And Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I don't know him, I would be a liar like you. Oh, snap, Jesus, cutting off heads. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham, the very first Jew, the very first progeny creator, your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it in faith, even though he was dead, and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you're not even 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham? You see what they know what Jesus is saying here. He's saying that Abraham and I, we were bros. And they're like, you're not even 50 years old. Abraham was 2,000 years ago. What are you saying? And Jesus said to them, verse 58, truly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. And this is the most clearest explanation of the fact that Jesus isn't claiming to be a created being. He is claiming to be creator. Because he is the I am of the Old Testament, which is the true living eternal God. Which is the reason they go, that's blasphemy, we're going to kill you. So Jesus himself claims, hey, I am the God. Abraham was excited to see my day because he knew I was coming into the world as the Savior of the world. I am blessing all the nations of the world because I'm the Savior of the world. And Abraham knew that, and he rejoiced to see my day. Here's our principle. Biblical hope does not just have the possibility of coming true, but the certainty of coming true. Woo! Look at me, I'm closing. Bring your eyes here. Ready? Listen to me. Many of us don't have hope. We don't have hope for our marriage. We don't have hope for our health. We don't have hope for our finances. We don't have hope for politics, which you probably shouldn't. Ready? We just go, I just don't have hope. Listen to me. You can't live without hope. But here's the thing, you're putting your hope in the wrong place. You're putting your hope in like, I'll make more money next year. You're putting your hope in, I'll get a relationship next year. You're putting your hope in, I'll get a new wife next year. You're putting your hope in, oh, maybe my health will be better, or maybe the politics will be better, or whatever your thing is. Ready? Stop putting hope in stuff that disappoints. Put your hope in God. Put your hope in Jesus. And never give up praying. Never give up. Never, ever, 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 ever give up on your marriage, on praying for your kids, on praying for your country, on praying for your pastor. Pray for everybody and have faith that if you're in accordance with God's will, God's going to get that work done. Hey, start being a man or woman of faith. Start being a man or woman that God can use to do great things in the world. Stop just flaking on God, going, I don't know, it didn't work out this time, or it's taking too long, or whatever. What are you talking about? Keep praying in faith. Be the rock of your family. Because there's going to be generations that may point back to you and go, that's where God started working in our family line. And it was you. And you'll never even see what God's going to do down the line when you're dead. But because of your faithfulness, God's going to do great things. So don't ever give up. I close with this. Believers have an anchor of hope in Jesus that what they patiently wait for will have an eternal payoff someday. What you wait patiently for will have an eternal payoff someday. That's why we don't give up. Abraham didn't give up, and God blessed him. How many of us are Abrahams and we just don't realize it yet, that God's calling us to great things for him, for his glory, but for our benefit? And we just give up. We just go, I'm 75 years old. How can I have babies? God is a God of miracles. God can save your marriage. God can save your soul. God can save this country. God can do anything. But it's oftentimes he waits on us to go, do you have faith in me I can do these things? Because I don't even need you. God can do whatever he wants to do. He's not bound by my faith or whatever. But here's the thing. It brings God glory when I have faith in him. Even when it's difficult. Even when it takes a long time. Even when it takes decades. Even when I'm dead. God still gets glory through the faith I have while I'm living. So be that person. Have hope today. Not in just random wishful thinking. Wishful thinking has very small amount of ability to come true. But faith, biblical hope is, God's called me to it. I believe it. God will get it done. That's real hope. That's hope you can stake your life on. That's hope that never goes away. That's a hope that never disappoints. Why? Because it's rooted in the goodness of God.